What's going on, everybody? It's Joe from God's Eye Games here to do Learning the Rules, Steel and Steed. We're going over Jousting for this video. So how we're going to kind of take this is we're going to go through how to set up your Tiltyard in the Jousting rules and scoring. Then we're going to roll over into your initiative, movement, impact, techniques, broken lances, stability tests, knock from your mount. All this stuff we're going to go over from start to finish. If you're following along in the PDF or the rule book, you're going to go on page 26, and this rolls from page 26 to page 29, and then page 30 is the injury table, which we'll be covering as well. So we'll be back in a second, and we're going to get things started off. We're going to lead off with setting up your Tiltyard. All right, everybody, we're back, and this is going to be the Tiltyard section of the Learning the Rules video for Jousting. So inside the rules, on the book on page 27, this is where we go over setting up your Tiltyard. Your Tiltyard, for game purposes, needs to be 40 inches. Now, if you have like a 3x3 playing area, what you guys are using, if you go corner to corner, that's enough room for you to set up a full Tiltyard. A note here, you don't need to have 40 inches of fence going all the way up. You know, if you only have like a 20-inch fence set up, totally fine. Just make sure you mark off another 10 inches back on each side, going down in either direction, so you can mark a starting point there. So you're still playing with 40 inches, but you don't need a full 40-inch tilt. Even though it looks really, really good when you set it up like that, it doesn't need to be the full distance. The most important thing is kind of getting the measurements right. So you want a 40-inch playing area for your tilt, and also in the middle, you're going to want an area that kind of shows the middle of the tilt, because that's going to come into play later. So for us, it's this straight beam going down, and then the rest of them you can see are 45-degree angles going all the way down. So we subtly put our midway marker, which is 20 inches for our tilt, right dead smack in the middle right there. And that's kind of what we're looking at right here. So like I said, 40-inch tilt, you want 20 inches on each side, and then you want a middle marker in the middle. Also, you want to make sure you have a clearly defined starting section. You know, this is what we use in the book. This is a little bit shorter. Right now, we're just kind of using this for more of a visual. But yeah, so like your starting line right here would be, you know, we'll say like that first post. Same thing down here, starting line you would start measuring from is that first post, and then the middle marker, like we said, is that straight beam. So that's all you really need for the jousting, for the tilt. Like I said, just a straight run, and then enough room for you to kind of move your knights up and down on each side, and that's really it. It's really simple to kind of set that up. So that's really just setting up your Tiltyard, super easy. Be coming back in a second to kind of go over the basic rules and scoring for the joust. All right, so we're back to go over the jousting rules and scoring. So the basis of how we have the joust set up is each one of your knights is going to have 5 passes to try to score points or try to knock your opponent from their mount. So what we call a pass is anytime at the beginning when we move these knights back, a pass is going to be your knight kind of coming down the fence line, your opponent's going to be doing the same thing from his direction, and then you're going to try to attempt to hit each other, knock each other from your mount, or score points doing that. So every time that happens, that's a pass. So you're going to have 5 attempts to kind of come down the line, as we see over there, and come down the line, try to score some points on your opponent, and then he's going to try to do the same to you, and that's considered a pass. So you're going to have 5 of those passes per jousting match. So each one of those is going to result in either points being scored or not being scored. So we're going to go over that during impact. But so if you just end up landing a clean hit on the opponent, that's going to count as 1 point. If you end up getting a critical success and that results in the lance breaking, that counts as 2 points. If you're able to knock your opponent from their mount, that counts as 3 points. So after 5 passes, you tally up how many points you've scored and your opponent has scored. Who's ever scored more wins. If there's a tie at the end of 5 passes, then you go into sudden death. Sudden death is just 1 pass. Whoever scores a point, whether it's 1, 2, or 3 points in that sudden death pass, wins the contest. There's going to come situations too when you're rolling, we're going to go over that for impact, where you might have a tie for your jousting dice. Like say both of you, your highest die is a 9. In that case, nobody scores a point. it's kind of considered both of your knights have kind of not scored a clean hit and they just pass by each other. So for that pass, no points are awarded, and you just kind of roundabout and go at it again for the next pass. So if there's a tie, no points are awarded. Another thing to take note of as well is if you do happen to knock your opponent from their mount. In that situation, if they get back up on the mount and are able to continue to play, it's 3 points. The match will continue regardless of what the score is and what pass it is. If you're able to dismount your opponent and they are not able to get back on their mount, and we're going to get back to that later after we go over impact, then the match would end regardless of what score it is, regardless of what pass it is. If your opponent is unable to get back up on their horse, you stand victorious. That's the end of the match. They're unable to continue, so you're victorious. So that's kind of how the rules and scoring go. It's 5 passes. You're going to be able to score 1 point for a clean hit, 2 points for a broken lance, 3 points to dismount your opponent. If your opponent isn't able to get back up, it's an automatic victory. At the end of 5 passes, whoever has the highest score, they're the ones who are considered victorious. And then, like we talked about before, if there's a draw, then you go into sudden death, and whoever scores the first point in sudden death, they end up winning the contest. Now, if there's a draw in sudden death as well, on that first sudden death pass, then you just go to another sudden death pass until somebody scores. So that's how the basic scoring rules and rules for jousting go. So we'll be back in a second to go over initiative and movement. All right, so we're back to go over the initiative and movement section of the book. This is on the top of page 28 for those of you following along in PDF or in the softcover book. So when you start off the joust, every pass you're going to be doing an initiative test as the knights reset and begin to make their way down the tilt. So every single pass is going to start off with an initiative test. To decide your initiative for you and your opponent, it's going to be your agility plus your horse's discipline plus any modifiers. And your modifiers might come from what kind of armor you're wearing, what kind of lance you're using. You're going to want to factor that into your dice roll and then add that to a D10. Whoever has the higher score between you and your opponent will get to go off the line first. Something to take notes with when you're creating your knight. Based on what horse you choose, it's a really big factor here, as well as what kind of armor you're going to be wearing as well. That's going to factor into agility and your horse's discipline and how fast you're going to be able to get off the line. So, like I said, when you're building your knight, definitely look at what kind of armor you're bringing to your contest, whether you're building them specifically just for a joust or if it's something that's going to have melee combat and stuff involved. You're going to want to kind of make either a balanced knight to kind of cover all that, or you're going to want to go head first into jousting. You might want to go like something like parade armor, and then might want to go with a more disciplined horse to kind of get you off the line. But these are the choices you're gonna have to make when you're creating your knight. But all that's going to factor into to all the stuff that we're going to be talking about now that we're actually getting into the combat and movement. So like I said, it's agility plus your horse's discipline plus any modifiers are going to come from your armor, skills, etc. Add that to a D10. Whoever has the highest is going to be the player to go first. And you'll do that for every single pass that you do. Now to move your knights, it's really simple. It's your horse's movement, and there's 4 different breeds of horse. Each horse moves a different distance. You're going to take that and you're going to add D5 to it. For those of you who don't know, D5 is just a D10. Whatever your roll is, you divide it by 2, and then you just round up. So say you rolled a 9, that would be worth 5 inches for movement, because it would be 9 divided by 2 is 4.5. You just round that up, gives you a 5 plus your horse's movement, and that's what you move down the line. So you'll do that, your opponent will do that, you'll go back and forth until you guys reach, like, we'll say like a point of impact, and we'll just kind of set that up right here on the line. So like I said, you'll move once, your opponent will move once, keep going back and forth until you reach a point where the front of your 2 bases, as you guys can see right here, the front of your 2 bases, once they're even with each other, that's when you're going to stop moving, and that's where impact is going to take place as far as both of you striking each other to score. One thing to note for the movement section, we talked about this earlier when we were setting up our tilts, that middle bar right here, the midway range. This is when this is going to come into factor here. we'll move these guys down a little bit. We'll say the Green Knight, I mean, he got off the line and he really got moving down the tilt. So he was able to completely pass the midway mark, his base, completely passed it, and impact happened on the Blue Knight's side of the tilt, past the midway point. We call this momentum. So, he was able to get off the line. He's really kind of moving down. Maybe the Blue Knight didn't get off fast enough. So as a bonus for the Green Knight, he's going to get a +1 strength if when he tries to dismount the Blue Knight, if he scores points and wins impact. This only comes into play if, like I said, if the Green Knight is able to win the impact roll, which is like the jousting roll for your jousting dice. If he's able to win that, and score a point, it's going to help him possibly knock the Blue Knight off the mount, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But that's marked by the middle section here, that straight bar that we talked about before in the middle. That's called momentum. Your knight has to be completely past his base. We mark it by bases. This is up to your playing group how you guys want to mark it. But if the base is completely past the middle marker, then it counts. Then you get the momentum bonus if that comes into play, and that only happens when you're past the middle mark. And like I said, so that's kind of how we do movement here. So initiative, to kind of recap, initiative happens at the start of the pass. At the start of every pass, it's going to be D10 plus agility plus horse's discipline plus any kind of modifiers that you might have. The horse's movement is going to be, like we said, the horse's movement plus a D5. And then that momentum bonus, if you're able to fly down the tilt and get impact on your opponent's edge by completely passing the midway point on your tilt, you're able to get a +1 strength to possibly dismounting your opponent from their horse. So these are all things that you want to remember when you're doing initiative and movement. So when we come back in a second, we're going to go over techniques and impact. All right, so we're back and we're ready to go over impact and techniques. So impact is pretty much where your two knights are going to meet on the tilt, and when they strike each other with their lances, we're going to call that impact. That's kind of how it ends up going here for jousting, for our rule set. So once both knights are even with each other, like I said, the front of their bases are parallel with one another. That's going to be where you initiate impact. For this, we're just putting it in the middle so we don't get momentum involved in here. We're just going to use this for basic learning right now. So what you're going to do for impact, you're going to take your knight's jousting ability, which is in their stat block. Then you're going to add in whatever lance that they're going to be using. And when you combine the lance and that jousting number with your stat block's jousting number, that's how many dice you're going to roll. Your opponent's going to do the same exact thing. You're both going to roll dice. Whoever has the highest dice roll is going to be the one that scores points. Now, let me just say, it's just the highest dice roll. Even if you have 3 dice higher than your opponent's highest die, it doesn't matter for this. The one die that's the highest die is the only scoring die. So if you roll like a 9, an 8, and a 7, and your opponent's highest die is a 6, you're only going to score with that 9 for jousting. So you'll get a clean hit point for the joust. So you'll score 1 point for that 9. And that's kind of how impact goes. So like I said, both of you are going to roll off, and whoever has the highest die is going to be the one who scores the points for this particular pass. Now, and then, like I said, whether it's a clean hit, like I said, 1 through a 9 will be scored as a clean hit. A 10 is a critical success. If you win the joust with the 10, that's considered a broken lance. So a broken lance will score you 2 points, like we talked about in scoring earlier. And another good thing about the broken lance is that your opponent has to re-roll a successful stability test on that pass. So, like I said, if you hit him with a 10, he has to confirm that successful stability test, which we're going to get into in a second. So like I said, both knights, roll your joust dice pools. Whoever has the highest die, you get the clean hit, possibly a broken lance. And then that's going to force your opponent to also take a stability test. In the case that there's a tie, let's say you both roll a 9 for your die, it's going to be a wash, and you're just going to kind of ride past each other, circle back around, and you'll start the next pass that way with neither knight scoring a point. So that's kind of how that's going to work right there. Another thing to kind of throw in here too, and this is also on page 20, is techniques. So what we wanted to do and we're going to set it back up at the start here. So another thing that we wanted to do, instead of just making it a dice pool against dice pool, we wanted to give players opportunity to kind of make some decisions opposed to just rolling on a table or, you know, just seeing who has the higher die kind of situation. We wanted to give players an opportunity to use these things called techniques. So techniques is something that you're going to pick. You can do it anytime before you start your movement for the pass. So, you know, initiative, you're going to find out who goes first, and then before your knight moves, you're going to have to choose a technique. If you do not choose a technique, whether you forget to or you just don't want to, the default is the standard technique, which gives you no bonuses, no penalties, nothing. It's literally what you see is what you get as far as your knight's stats go. So both knights are going to be able to choose a technique before they move off the line, or before the first knight moves off the line, to do it that way. The next technique that you're going to be able to choose from is going to be the accurate technique. So this one's more about scoring points. You're kind of giving up a little bit of the ability to dislodge your opponent from their horse, because you're going to be focusing more on landing a clean strike to score points. So by doing this, you're going to gain an extra die to your jousting pool. So if you already have like 3 dice in your jousting pool, by choosing the accuracy technique, you're going to get 4 dice. You're going to get an extra die. The downside to this is, let's say you win in this pass, like say like you come down here and, you know, you guys have your dice roll and you end up winning the impact roll. You're going to have a -1 strength penalty to trying to dismount your opponent if he fails the stability test. So like I said, with the accuracy technique, you're going to be able to score that point for the clean hit or possibly a broken lance. But when it actually comes to dismounting your opponent, you're going to be at a slight disadvantage. You're going to be taking a -1 penalty to doing so. So that's for the players who want to play for points and try to get out ahead and score big. The accuracy technique is very good to use for that. The next technique that you can use as well is going to be the thrust technique. This technique is the exact opposite of the accuracy technique. So when you go in to use the thrust technique, you're focusing on strength, and if you do end up landing a hit on your opponent, this one's all about trying to knock them off the horse. So what ends up happening here is if you win the jousting roll-off, you get a +1 strength when trying to knock your opponent from their mount if they fail their stability test. The downside is your jousting pool, we'll just say it's a 3 as well. You lose 1 die for choosing the thrust technique, so you go down to 2 dice for the impact roll. So that's kind of the trade-off. Like say like maybe you're down points and it's like the 4th or 5th pass, and you know you're not going to catch this guy, your opponent, as far as scoring goes. You know what, I'm just going to go thrust technique because I got to dismount him to win. This would be where you would want to do that. So you go all in to try to take the guy off the horse. I don't want to get into to strategy too much, but I'll just give like a little tidbit here. If you look at what kind of lance you take with what kind of horse you take, and then you kind of factor in maybe what kind of technique you're going to use more often than not, you can put together some really good builds that are kind of real risk reward. Like one of them I'll throw out there right now is if you go with the heavy lance, and I believe it's the courser horse, which is like super fast but has really bad stability, is what you're looking at right here, and you use the thrust technique, the bonus of using a horse like that is you might be able to, like we talked about earlier, get that speed to get past the midway point to get that momentum bonus. Then you factor in the heavy lance that gives you a +1 strength. You factor in the thrust technique that gives you a +1 strength. And then if you end up getting the momentum bonus, that's another +1 strength. You add all together for your chance to dismount your opponent if they fail a stability test. You're looking at a +3 just based off of those 3 factors that we just talked about right there. So that's a really good strategic way to kind of build your knight. It's very high risk but very high reward as well. So just keep that in mind if you have like a play style that you like to use, whether it's more about like playing points or being a little riskier and trying to dismount. You factor that in with how you choose your horse and how you choose your lance, and add that in with the technique, and you can put together a whole bunch of different strategic approaches to how you want to approach the joust when you're taking on your opponent. So that's impact and techniques. We're going to come back in a second. We're going to go over stability tests and then knocking your opponent from their mount. So we'll be back in a second. All right, so now we're back to kind of go over our stability tests. So stability tests, you're going to end up taking these if you're on the losing end of an impact. So like we talked about earlier, if the joust dice fly and your opponent rolls higher than you, they're going to get the point. And then also now you're going to have to take a stability test. Stability test is pretty much you being able to weather the impact and still stay on horseback, continue down, and come back for another pass. That's pretty much what it is. So this is kind of just a way to see if you get knocked from your mount or not. So like I said, stability test taken anytime a clean hit is scored against the knight. It could be a clean hit, broken lance. Either one of those is going to result in you taking a stability test. Stability test is your agility plus your horse's stability, plus any modifiers that you might have from your equipment, and then you're going to add in a D10. To pass the stability test, you need a 6+ or higher. If you pass it, you just continue to run down the line and circle back for another pass. Your opponent will still get the points for scoring, but you're not dismounted. The stability test only has to do with you staying on your horse. The points scored or the points scored, there's no way to negate that after impact. So like we said, stability test, agility plus your horse's stability plus any modifiers you might have from your equipment or anything else happening, plus a D10. If you score a 6+, you pass. Like we talked about earlier, if somebody scored with a broken lance, you'd have to roll a 6+ and then a 6+ again to kind of confirm that. So that's another thing to keep in mind. If you end up, say you end up failing the stability test, you're not just knocked off your horse at that point. This is where your opponent has to kind of seize the opportunity. So on a failed stability test, your opponent now has to make a strength roll of an 8+. If he's able to do that, your knight is knocked from his mount and lands on the ground. So if that happens, your opponent, instead of scoring 1 or 2 points based on the impact of the broken lance, they're now awarded 3 points. You don't get, the clean hit +3 for dismount. You just get the 3 points for knocking your opponent off. So if that happens on an 8+, your opponent's knocked to the ground, and then they have to see if they get back up off the ground. So when you're knocked from your mount and you're laying down, we'll just put them down here for discussion's sake right now. When you're knocked to the ground, if you want to get back up on your mount, which you're going to want to, because if you don't, you automatically lose regardless of what the score is or what point in the match it is. You just need to roll a strength test of a 6 up, and then you're able to get up back onto your knight. Now, this is just a natural roll of a 6+ as well. You're not going to add in your equipment or your joust. I mean your lance or anything like that. This is literally just your knight's natural 6+ to kind of get back up onto their horse and continue the match. If they're able to do so, then he gets back on the horse. The crowd gives him an applause, and he goes back down the line, and you continue the contest as normal. It's just your opponent scores 3 points for the contest. If you fail to get back up and you say you roll like a 3 or a 4, the contest is over. Your opponent has won because you're not able to get back up on your mount. And then you're going to turn to page 30, and there's a jousting injury table. If you're just doing a one-night tournament with guys at the club, it's still a fun thing to roll, but it might not have as big of an impact. For those of you who'd like to play campaigns, do things like that, this is kind of where the jousting injury table kind of comes into effect. So you're going to roll a D10. The lower you roll, the worse it is. I mean, you can die if with a natural roll of a 1 on the injury table. You'll fall, and it'll be an awkward fall, and you'll break your neck, and that's kind of the end of it. On a 2, you'll fall, your lance will shatter, and you end up killing your horse. So as you start from 1 and work your way up to 10, things get better for you. So if you do get knocked off and you don't get back on your mount, especially in campaign play, or maybe you're doing like a big night tournament, one-night tournament at your club, don't roll low on the jousting table because it could end your night prematurely or definitely affect you throughout the remainder of the contest. So that's kind of how stability tests work, and knock from your mount. We'll go over it one more time for you guys. So stability test is your agility plus your horse's stability plus modifiers plus a D10. You end up doing that, and if you have a 6+ or higher, you're good. You just continue down the line and come back. Your opponent just gets his points, but you're not off the horse. If you fail that roll, then your opponent has to pass a strength test of an 8+, and if he does so, you're knocked from your mount. They're now awarded 3 points instead of what they scored before that. and then you have to make another test to kind of get back up on your horse, which is a natural 6-up for your strength. So you just use your night strength test. Let me say that again, just your night strength test. Don't factor in your heavy lance to helping you, get that strength bonus to get back on the horse. None of that stuff factors in. It's just your night's natural strength. So that'll help you get back up there. If you get back on, you just continue the contest as normal. If you fail, then that's the end of the contest. Your opponent wins, and then you have to roll on the injury table. So that's kind of things to think about here. That's kind of how we're going to wrap up jousting right now. From start to finish. Like I said, we went over the rules, how to set up your Tiltyard. We went over impact and techniques, broken lances, stability tests, getting knocked from your mount, everything else that goes with that. Like I said, it starts on page 26 and it ends on page 30 for those of you who want to kind of dig in a little bit deeper and see word for word what we're talking about for the jousting. But I hope this kind of set you guys up to where you can just throw the models down on the table after watching this, or watch it while you play and kind of speed you guys through the process. I think for jousting, once you roll the dice once or twice on here, it's super easy to kind of pick up and get the flow of it. It'll rip through pretty quick after you've done it like 2 or 3 times. And like a little side note for you guys as well, playing with favor dice roll over in the jousting. So if you're using favor dice, every time you end up getting that broken lance, put a little favor die aside, because you can use that to re-roll, other impact rolls. You can use that to re-roll your stability test. You can use that to re-roll knocking your opponent. So don't forget to use your favor dice when you're jousting. Most people just think about it as like a melee and combat thing, but favor dice are used in jousting as well. So remember to use that mechanic in here, because that will either save your bacon or help you knock your opponent clean off their horse and really kind of change the tide of the jousting contest. So hope this video was helpful. Let me know down in the comments if there's anything else you guys want me to touch on as far as jousting goes, if you have any questions, or maybe some other learning videos you want to do along the way. So thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys later.